Welcome back to the Dungeon Master's Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game. With every conversation, we hope to inspire as many as possible to keep on Dungeon Mastering.
And I'm one of your hosts, DM Neal, aka Joe Maniac. And today, DM Derrick and I are going to be talking to Sammy Glicker, the founder of Dungeons and Cabins. You'll learn more about that in our little interview section. But of course, we're going to be talking about a subject that Sammy brought to us about the fact that TTRPGs are meant to be fun. It's a conversation where we get into the idea of getting lost in the weeds of all the things we need to do, all the things we want to do, all the things we didn't do, but to always have the guiding light be the fact that these are meant to be fun. But with that out of the way, let's head to the meat.
I'm starving. We ain't had nothing but maggoty bread for 3 stinking days.
Why can't we have some meats?
The plate meat's back on the menu, boys!
And today we're really excited to bring in Sammy Glicker, the founder of Dungeons and Cabins. Welcome, Sammy, to... I was about to say how not to DM. Welcome, Sammy, to the Dungeon Master's Block.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
We are also excited, and as we always do, we want to kick off our little interview section. Is there anything that you can tell us about yourself that you think our listeners would enjoy hearing?
Well, the D&D podcast, right? I've been DMing for almost 5 years, so I would consider myself a newbie, a beginner. Like, people have been playing this for a very long time, but my background is in improv. I performed improv comedy for 8 years in Los Angeles. And that has been a huge foundation for me moving into role-playing games.
Very nice.
Okay, we're going to have a quick PSA because I feel like I think about this all the time and don't say it. It's always interesting when I think about like someone that talks about the length of time that they've been DMing. And I also think of like the person who's like, oh, I've only been DMing for a year. 3 times a week. I'm like, then you win. You win. I've been DMing for like 20 something years. And it doesn't matter. You win. You outpaced me within year 1 because my home group moved to like once a month. And so it's interesting. So I will give you the official stamp of approval. You are not a newbie. You done did it. The second you get behind that screen, you learned so much. And it's why I have almost all of my players come over to the other side of the screen as quickly as I can get them there, because I think it just makes them a better player, as well as it helps me be a better DM by observing like their different approach to it. So
this isn't, I completely agree with you. And I don't know, maybe I think I say it because I hear like, it's just brought up a lot. And I think that that's one of those like stigmas we can get rid of. Like exactly what you're saying. You've DM'd once. You're amazing. You did it. You're great. And we're all always learning. I think that it's that mindset of like always being a beginner. I could DM for 40 years and still there's stuff to learn. And we're all beginners. We're all experts. I think that's the lesson.
So, were you performing in any particular theaters in LA that people might be familiar with?
Yeah, mostly West Side Comedy. I performed all around LA, so there's a lot of small improv theaters that the landscape is very different pre and post COVID because how do you stay? So Pack Theater's still here, UCB's still here, obviously. IO's gone. Their salon, Fanatic Salon is still here. Like West Side was my home base. That was where my house team was. That was my primary, and then I would hop around with indie teams.
That's awesome.
Yeah, there's a Comedy Sports just like down the road in the next town over, and I'm trying to do their workshop this spring/late winter here. So hopefully I will be joining the ranks of the comedy improv folks soon, but we'll see how that goes.
Incredible. And just like DMing, like you already know everything you need to know. You're already great at it. The hardest part is just driving there.
We'll see. We'll see. My other friend who DMs with me like off and on with our home group, he was the one who's like, let's do it. So, we're going to see how it goes, but yeah.
It's listening and responding,
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. The closest I have is doing a spoken word version of Tequila during karaoke. And so it landed so well this last weekend. I was at a small convention and I had never done it before, but in my head, I'm like, this has to work. And it worked beautifully. So there you go. I don't know. There's no segue out of that. So the next question we have is there anything that you're currently working on, and as always, that you can tell us about?
Right. I can tell you about Camp, Dungeons and Cabins. I am already starting season 2. We have 1 full year under our belt, so 1 full session. Dungeons and Cabins is a all-inclusive 4-day, 3-night summer camp for adults where what you do at camp affects what happens in your game. Nice. So you want to take a long rest in real life and go hang out in a treehouse, you might find a healing potion. You win the archery tournament, you might win a magic item. You make friends with people in other parties and find out information you need for your quest because it's a weekend-long epic. So everything is going to intertwine and combine and culminate together in the end. So we're working on the second year, and we're writing the story right now.
Very fun. Awesome. I know that you did it for this last fall, right? It was September.
Yeah.
Are you planning on doing it the same time next year, or are you trying to do like a spring and a fall around those, kind of before and after the main big busy season for summer camps? What's the plan?
Exactly. It's like that swing season. So I say summer camp with air quotes, which you can't see, but we want to avoid the heat, right? We want to avoid the bugs. So adult summer is, yes, roughly the same time. It should be in the fall again, probably roughly September. Ideally in the future, it is more frequent. I would love a spring one. I would love like a spooky, like Halloween one, a winter one. Like it's so easy to think about how many iterations there could be and have them thematic to when and where it is.
It's just how much time do you have to put into it, right?
Exactly. Because like what I love about it is like the granular details. Like the big bad was on the shirt and people were like, that's such a weird, like, what a weird little detail. I don't know why that's there. And the last day when they appeared, they're like, oh my God, everything. And they're like putting all the little pieces together. So, the devil was in the details, as they found out.
That's awesome.
So you were talking about it previously. All of the adventures or all of the different parties were all playing in like the same world in the same story, and then it kind of they all meet at the end. That's awesome.
Like literally, they were starting from different corners of the map. Basically, they were in a paladin's retreat, but they were all in kind of a different neighborhood, solving a different crime, puzzle, adventure, mystery.
That's fun. That makes it different than your typical kind of convention where you've got, tons of different people all running different stuff. It's more like what an epic might be, or that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, we have the time, right? We have 4 days to do this and we have the space. So it's like everybody being in the same room. You kind of want them to be related. Like you want that camp feeling of like making forever friends, and what better way to like go through something together. And then we have, all the DMs in the same room. So there's things that we can do there because we all know what each other is running and they are related to each campaign. We have some incredible videos that I just don't know if I can share because we have so many secrets in our belt that, we'll keep some close to the chest, but there's a lot of fun stuff you can do when people are playing in the same space together.
I mean, listeners know I've been on the D20 cruise the past couple of years, and then the GM Tim and I run 2 tables together. The players may not know that initially. Yeah. They didn't know that last year until day 2, and I just walked into Tim's room and he walked into mine. At which point they're like, "Oh, okay. Wait, does that mean the other groups at the same time?" Sure are.
Exactly.
Wait, can we talk to them? If you can find them. And they're just like, what? And they put up a ransom note to go fight. Literally, like we had raffle tickets as part of the convention, and they put up like offered their raffle tickets to like find my group. And then eventually they started plotting the whole night, and they asked, is it okay if what we did? And it said, yep, same kind of concept. Boat time is real time. And so anything that you 2 groups did together is totally fine. Whatever you guys discussed, then feel free to use in the game. So.
That's fun. It's so fun.
I feel like it almost harkens back to like you almost don't see the epics as often. Like that was a more common thing a while ago where a lot of, shops would put that on where you have multiple tables working together or sanctioned, Adventurers League events. Or I remember going to I think it was like 8 players per table, 3 tables all working together when 5th edition was first coming out. It was still called D&D Next, and it was epics. And I love the idea of like circling back to these and having like that cohesive shared memory of being there and doing these things. So yes, kudos to you. I mean, you were already going to get them anyways, but now that I know more, feel free to take more kudos.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yes. So we do have a surprise question. Often, the listeners will know, it's a surprise to me because I sometimes won't think of it until this moment. But is there
I have one if you don't, Neal.
Perfect. I don't really. I was going to make it up right now. So Derrick definitely has one.
As a person who's attended a few different summer camps, mostly for like Boy Scouts, I would love to know, Sammy, what merit badge you would be teaching everybody summer. What is like your jam? What's the thing you're best at that you would be teaching everybody else?
You know, we touched on this a bit earlier, but I would is the one I would earn, right?
No. What one would you be teaching everyone to do? Like,
okay. I would teach everyone skills to earn their yes and badge. I think it's really important in a camp setting to like, you have to be committed. If you're not committed to this environment we've created, the reality we're creating together, like, what are you doing here? We're adults and we're at a summer camp. Like, buy in, have fun, say yes, and roll with it. Add to it. Get involved. For sure, it would be improv related.
I like it.
And I would probably have them do some like 3-line scenes and some space work, and nothing too embarrassing, but enough so that they can go, "Oh, I can do this."
Nice. That would be a sweet badge to put on your shirt. Is the yes and badge? I'd like that.
Ask me about my yes and badge.
All right, Derrick, you asked a question. That means you got to answer it.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to be clever and make it both tabletop and outdoor related. You know what? I'm a pretty good cook, if I do say so myself. So I would call it the Hero's Feast badge, and I would teach them how to take ingredients, whatever it is that we have, and make something really delicious out of it. And it would be like learning how to dice and saute and whatever else. That would be mine. Is the Hero's Feast badge.
Nice. So yeah, so I helped out at a camp for kids in the foster care system for probably 15 years or so. This doesn't really tie to anything, but I have a lot of experience in the badge I'm about to be able to teach everyone. Breakfast isn't that important badge. I'll just sleep through it. It's fine. Let's be honest. I'm on vacation. I will make up. Yeah, I'll make up for it. Yeah. I'll get a little extra lunch. I'll get a little extra dinner. We'll go to wherever the employees are supposed to be. There's usually snacks there. I'll make up for it. Breakfast isn't that important.
Sleep is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because typically because it goes back to I'm definitely earning the all-in yes and badge, because when I'm there, all bets are off. I'm all the way in, and I'm going to burn through everything. I just need more sleep when I'm there. So yeah, breakfast, not that important.
Because who knows how late you're up dealing with shenanigans, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. I have stories about being up very, very late, and not always for a great reason. When a kid's like, I'm sick, and you're like, oh, cool, because you need an adult to help. So here I am. I think all of those questions were fun, namely the one about our badges that we would teach. But the topic that, Sammy, you brought to us, which I absolutely loved, was the idea that TTRPGs are supposed to be fun. And it's wild that I think that this is an important conversation. Like, I don't know that I would have gotten to the place to bring this up as a conversation to have. But then the thing we like asking is like, what kind of put that at the forefront of your mind as a conversation to have?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. I think you see discourse online and on social about like the great DMs of our day and all these, the ways at prepping and different groups, and not every table is for every person, and rules lawyers are right, rules lawyers are wrong. there's a lot of like stress that kind of comes with the territory. They're supposed to be fun. Like there's so many parts of it that I think we can like drop the comparisons and drop the things we don't like. And I just think it is important to remember like why we started playing games. You know, we're choosing to sit around a table with our friends and have fun. Above the table, we're friends having fun. In the table, you know, we can be crying and being devastated that our backstories are coming back to haunt us, even though we wrote them and we did it on purpose because that is fun. You know, having nightmares of our character can be fun. It can also not be fun. And, you know, I think talking about what is fun at each particular table is something that's very important to playing and to maintaining a game.
Think and it always harkens back to this key question that I feel like DMs get asked often by someone that's not as familiar with the TTRPGs is like, did you win? And I'm like, well, the only way I can tell is look, 2 players. Did you have fun? Yes. Then I won. I did the thing I was trying to do because everyone else, including myself at the table, had a good time. And there is like a level of ownership that kind of falls to the DM to some degree. But I think that like a really important part of this conversation is that isn't that the goal for all of us? Like when we all sit down at the table is to have at bare minimum a good time, if not a fun time.
Yeah, they say, you know, DMs are the facilitators of fun, but the players are too. Like, you also should be making choices that are fun for you, or playing the game that's fun for you, or sitting at the table that's fun for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's kind of on everybody.
Yeah, it's almost like a hierarchy to me. Like, obviously, you should be doing something that's fun for you. And then after you've kind of achieved that, you should start looking around and being like, okay, is it fun for everybody else? Especially if you're making, I don't know, like sometimes, you know, you've got those players who make interesting choices that do affect everybody else. And you've got to make sure that everyone's okay with that. That kind of leads me to want to ask both of you, what do you feel like are some of the biggest blockers that you have seen at your tables or you've seen at other tables of people having a good time, you know, that are kind of the biggest hurdles we have to cross as DMs?
This isn't fun. I think one of the biggest things is like, it varies on how easy this is of a conversation for each of us to have with our tables. At a con, it is almost impossible, but at your home table, like the idea of like knowing what someone else is already bringing to the table in terms of, did someone in their family pass away? Did they just lose a job? Did they, you know, all of these factors that can factor into them potentially not having fun. I mean, I have also really strong theories about like, you can set yourself up to enjoy a movie. And if you don't do that, you won't enjoy the movie. Like if you have to go to the bathroom the whole time, or you end up in the second row, or all of these factors. So it's like, it's almost, you're trying to figure out like what barriers are happening before anyone's even in the room.
Yeah.
And is there anything that you can do as a group? Because again, we're all here to have a good time. We're all here to be, you know, friends. Is there anything we can do to help lift those barriers? And there may not be, or at the most set them aside for the session. Is there something we can do? Have a short conversation to say, hey, I know that's going on, and I want to take these few hours to try and, I mean, even going back to the camp I was discussing, the whole goal of that camp is to try and give those children a week where the factors in their lives aren't applying to them the same way. To say, hey, we're going to set those barriers aside. I want to have a conversation with you about those and be there for you. But for right now, I think it would behoove all of us to just go all in. Sammy has a merit badge and I don't have it yet. So yes. And, but yeah, those are kind of things that the number one thing I think of is the things prior to sitting down.
What about you, Sammy?
Yeah, I think it's funny because I play at work a lot. I actually played at work last night.
Nice.
And that's one of the things I noticed. Like, you can tell when people sit down and the energy they bring to the table, sometimes they're here to escape that. And so it's like, you know, it's like, all right, so we're going to need to like, let's have a little more energy in this episode so people can forget what happened before this. We're also like in the four walls at work. So computers are up. So it's like, can we close Teams? Can we close Outlook? Like these things that kind of ping you, because in the moment maybe it doesn't take away from your fun, but the person across the table from you is like trying to role play with you and you're pinging in and out. So like trying to limit those outside factors, like distractions at the table is a big one. I think also like play styles. And I don't know I think for some people, maybe it's easy to know what is your play style. And some people are like, I'm super flexible, and some people are figuring it out. Mm-hmm. But that can also be a big barrier to know if that's the table for you or not.
Yeah. I think of like brand new people, oftentimes whatever their first experience is at a table playing role-playing games, they assume that is what every role-playing game is like at every table, right? And so if they have a bad experience at their first table, then the likelihood that they're going to try it again is low. I've talked to plenty of people who were like, it's not for me. I didn't have fun or whatever. And I feel like there's a percentage of people out there who just probably it's not for them. And that's true. But I feel like there's some folks out there who don't give it a second shot, who it could be way fun for them if they found the right fit, the right table, the people who are going to kind of, get their jokes or play the way that they want to play. But yeah, you're right, Sammy. Like a lot of people who are brand new to it, just they don't even know there is such thing as play styles, and so they don't know how to like ask for what they are interested in, and get it out of the game that they're in. So
if it is their first one, yeah, they would have no idea of knowing. Like I've seen some tables where they say like, my character would ask the bartender for a drink, and me personally, like, as an improviser, like I want to say it, I want to role play that situation, but like that's definitely not for everybody. And so, I mean, there's 100 ways to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even figuring out some of the steps in between, because like I feel the same way, but then I'm like, okay, but is that bridge too far? And I think that's one of the other things that can get in the way of fun is preconceived notions of the person that's only watched Critical Role. And what's interesting is like as someone that started at like episode 5 of season 1, but also having the DM experience that I had, I was like, these people have clearly been playing with each other for a very long time. Like that is the only way that it works the way that it does. And then then that's when you just start digging into the lore as any critter would. But the idea that like, oh, they have been playing together for years. And not only that, they're blessed with the skills and experience to even step into that with a lot of pre-built. And the idea that like starting that person out saying, how about instead of saying my character would, just start using their name every time? Grog does. Grog asks for a grog, and then like start like try. And it's very difficult. It's very difficult for me. I was for a time a very bad teacher at DMing because I hadn't taught for like too long. Like, and then you're like, wait, oh no. I don't know how I do that thing. I sit down and it happens. Let me try and see if I can like codify any of this. And so, which is, I would say, I will throw that out there to anyone. Try teaching someone your DM style, and all it will do, bare minimum, it will help solidify what you do because you aren't recognizing all the things you do. And like, I changed a lot of the things that I do because I was trying to show someone and recognizing like, oh, I can change this a little bit or this here and that there. But yeah, helping them with their preconceived notions and like helping them along, because I think a lot of people assume it will be instantly fun because they've seen these versions of it that are filtered. Is it social media? Is it a show that's been edited heavily and is amazing because it's had that touch? It's, are they, and rightfully so, are they taking scenes a second time? Because they're like, I don't think that emotional beat landed. Let's go ahead and run that again, because they're afforded that opportunity. But when you sit down at your home game, that's not how that works. Like
100%. And I mean, they're literally professionals for a reason. They've studied this craft. They've studied storytelling for so long. I think that's something that can also be really intimidating and stop people from playing or think that they're not going to be good enough or aren't good enough, where it's like, if you don't know all the rules, then you can't even begin. You know what I mean? Like I've seen people who, I don't know, maybe if they were intimidated or they were just not interested because it seemed like too much work. But they sat at my table and I was like, it's my job to know the rules. You don't have to know anything. I will help you with everything. And they played and they saw that like not everybody knows all the rules, and that's perfectly okay. And I just think that like it demystified what it was D&D specifically, but it just demystified like what that game is for them. And they had so much fun. And I was so glad I could open that window for them so they could see like, oh, it's not intimidating at all. It's just like a bunch of friends being goofy. That's all it is.
Oh, it's so good.
At that game.
Yeah. Neal and I were having this conversation earlier this week, actually. I was chatting with a gentleman who runs another podcast, and he'd mentioned he had tried tabletop games, and he's been playing for a while. And I was like, so have you ever run games? And he's like, oh, no, I could never. And it's like, oh, man, just so many people get so in their head about, like, what it means to run a game and what it takes to run a game. And, like, I feel like people just think that it's so much harder, and they have to know so much more and be, perfect at it. And it's like, guys, really, you can jump in with little to no experience and you will be just fine. So, yeah.
And you're playing with your friends.
Right.
Like more than likely, you're not going to go run at a con if you've never done it.
No, that'd be a terrible
with your
idea.
Friends who are going to support you and want you to run a game.
Yeah, I feel like my number one thing I've realized I do at cons is just be really open and say, hey, look, I've been doing this for a while. And because of that, I don't know the rules. I really don't. I don't know which ones I'm pulling from anymore. And a whole bunch of new ones came out recently. And honestly, most of the time I'm going to ask you for a check. I'm going to be like, hey, can I see your character sheet real quick? And I'm like, yeah. Can I get one of these? Like it's the easiest way for me to know what should I even ask you for? Because like, if I'm looking at it, I can parse out like, okay, this is the thing I should ask for. But if I'm just trying to pull it out of my head, I'm like, I already have the story that I want to tell. I don't even really want to take up too much mental capacity for all the rules. When I need them, I'll use them. And when I don't, I won't. And everything can change. Like over the weekend, I had someone who was their first, it was a father and daughter, and it was her first time playing D&D. Luckily, I was told that because they were told specifically to come to my table. So one of the things I do, and I don't know that I've ever given this piece of advice this way, but do this at your home table. I do it at cons where I say, here's a note card. Go ahead and write down 3 to 5 things you'd like to see in this session. I'll promise you one of them because I can't promise you all of them, because inevitably you have that one person that writes conflicting things on their own card. So I'll promise one, but I can't really promise more than that. And so she had requested that there were cats that they could fight. And so all of my orcs immediately became cats. It didn't matter at all. All of the stats rolled exactly the same. The damage was the same. And they were cats. And all I saw was an ear-to-ear smile from a child who was like, yeah, the cats that I asked for, they're right here. And we're fighting them. This is amazing. Wow, what is this? They're orcs, by the way. But no, I mean, they're cats. So like, it's those small things. But I realize, like, I think that's another, going back to kind of the question you asked, Derek, was like, what are the barriers for fun? I think, yeah, and I'm bad about it, or I was bad about it, not checking back in with those friends, because I think of like the amount of time that you spend apart is, it's important for them to go live their life and you to go live yours, certainly, but like you don't know all the things that are occurring. So then, like, if you're not checking back in, did they go watch an anime that you've never even heard of? And now, like, that's their thing. Like, we all know that. We all know that in nerd culture. You found the one thing and you're like, that's my entire life for the next 7 months is I'm just going to watch this, talk about it, learn everything about it, and dive all the way in. And so, like, checking back in of like, even maybe that's the question you asked, like, what's the coolest piece of media you've watched lately? So yeah, like, in fun fact, if you just start throwing in things they already like, also a great way to have fun.
So with these kind of hurdles and stuff in mind that we've talked about, what's kind of like the best way you found to address when you notice people aren't having fun, both like at your table or, afterward, kind of like the above table or the post session discussions, or like even, after everyone's gone home and you're like texting or something, what are the best ways you have found to kind of navigate and then rectify the situations?
if it's mid-game, I think something that I found that's been successful to kind of get people out of whatever is happening, maybe they're bored, maybe they started thinking about that thing they brought to the table, is to engage them more. And they'll kind of let you know what they're looking for, like depending on how they're playing. And so just being flexible and adjust to what that person needs or what that party needs, just to kind of infuse a little energy there to like really engage that person. That can just like drop you into the world pretty quickly.
Yeah. I found, especially like when I am not talking, then something else is going on. That's a great time to scan the faces, whether they're on Discord or whether they're around your table. Like see how everyone is. And like you said, Sammy, like you can usually tell if people are checked out, and you can kind of start focusing on them with those tips that you gave. I like that. What about you, Neal?
Leave and never come back. No, got him. One of the things I like doing, because I think so I don't know if I have something directly to address it right now, but something that like kind of puts a stopgap in there is I like having shorter breaks more often. So I'll usually, especially at a con, but as well at the home game, basically every hour I try to take a 5 or 10. Usually it's more like I lean towards the 5, but then basically at the hour, take a 5. At the hour, get up, take a 5. Everyone just something to kind of break that up, because part of it can also just be literally just physically sitting in the same location for that many hours in a row and not getting up and doing anything. It could have someone disengage, and someone could be named Neal, but like the idea of just sitting there for that long, there's something about it that can make you kind of just start to check out because you're just sitting there. So yeah, my number one thing is to have short breaks more often, but have them be shorter.
I like that too. In the very first, well, I guess it wasn't the first. The second table I ran, the first one was also work colleagues. So it's fun that you play with your colleagues too, Sammy. That's I don't meet a lot of people who play with their, at work. So it's always nice to know there's other people doing it. But that was the first game I played in, and then like immediately after we finished, I was like, all right, I'm gonna run a homebrew session for you guys now. After that was over, I started my own home group. And in that group, my friend's wife, she played with us for the first 5-ish levels. And then I think COVID hit or something. There was some big break. And then when we were able to like figure out a way to start playing again, he came and she didn't show up. And it was like, oh, she just doesn't want to play anymore. And I'm not saying it's a regret, but like, it's just one of those things where like maybe if I had been better about looking around at everyone, seeing what everyone was engaging with and like communicating with everybody, she might have decided she wanted to stick around. Maybe not, maybe she was one of those people who was like, yeah, that's enough. I'd rather be home and do whatever else I'm going to do. But that's okay. It was a learning thing for me. It was a lesson to be learned. And now I'm much better about, the communication and checking in with folks, both at the table and afterward, to make sure that everyone's kind of on the same page and we're still enjoying what we're doing. And if not, like taking the feedback or taking whatever it is that they tell me and trying to incorporate it. But yeah, like, I guess that is to say, like, no DM is ever going to be perfect. And like me, certainly not either. It's happened to all of us where we've missed something and, it's just something to learn from. So there's no shame in that happening to you if it has, or if it does in the future, everybody listening. But yeah, just know that there's definitely ways to address it if you notice it happening.
Yeah. And sometimes you don't. I had a friend a couple weeks ago tell me, she was like, hey, did you notice that you were kind of picking on that guy? I'm like avoiding names. Do you notice you were picking on him at the session? And I was like, I was?
Right.
And they're like, yeah, you were like giving us a lot of narrative freedom and saying yes to a lot of like the ridiculous things we asked, but you weren't saying yes to him. And I was like, oh, okay, why was that happening? So I was like going back through, what did I do? Where was I being resistant and why? And I was like, oh, because he gave himself a raccoon 5 minutes before the session started, and they're all level 1, so it's not super fair to everyone. I was like, okay. Because he's brand new too, so I give people a lot of slack and let them do a lot of crazy stuff within reason without breaking the game. And I was like, I can see where I was like, no, sir. And so I hit him up afterwards and I was like, just trying to like basically explain like that's my bad. We should have discussed it more or talked in the moment. I hope you don't feel anything weird about it. And he was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I had a great time. And I was like, okay, well, okay.
Crisis averted. Yeah.
Happy raccoon.
But yeah, totally. Like it's easy to do stuff like that subconsciously, and like other people might notice it, but you have no idea. And so, yeah, it's good to be open to that feedback and be ready to address it for sure.
Yeah, I think there's only a few things that like I can think of that would have me have a fairly large response during session. A lot of things I'll probably hold out to have, kind of like you mentioned, Sammy, have a conversation after the fact. The one that I know that I'm not going to allow to go very far, especially if I can try and see that like, oh, this seems like a thing that will continue to happen, is if someone is clearly taking the fun away from someone else to then have their own fun. And we all know that person, that player, it doesn't have to be D&D. It could be any other game. I know someone who used to play Warhammer that way, but the idea that someone is going to take away someone else's fun to have theirs, I'll stop at mid-session, no matter what it takes. That I'm not going to allow. You can take my fun, honestly, like that's not going to bother me. But if you're taking another player's fun, that's where I'm going to step in 10 out of 10 times. Yeah,
it's a cooperative game. Like I tell my players, like, have a motivation to want to work with the group, because at the end of the day, the most important thing to me is we're friends above the table. In the game, you guys can bicker and I'll check in and be like, you guys are actually okay, right? Like you're just role playing, fighting, but like above the table, we're good, right? Because that's why we're here. It's to hang out with our friends and then tell epic, cool adventure stories.
You would like to think so. I mean, but I think that, that's an important conversation to have. And I think, especially anyone listening, because obviously the podcast leans more towards DMs, but most of the time a DM has an opportunity to be a player as well. But I think like just trying to be more aware of what's going on at the table, which and I say that knowing how difficult that can be, because you are trying to hit certain beats, or you're trying to make sure that someone's backstory gets the light that you want it to be. And you're trying to think of the mechanics behind the monster, that you don't want to forget the special ability that it had. And wait, what damage did you do? Hold on. Wait, no. Hold on. That's not right. It's right.
Is the background music going?
Yeah. You're like, you have a raccoon. It's fine. I don't care. And moving on. And so like, and I do understand that it's a big lift. It really, truly is. And I think that, and maybe in my own way, maybe that's some of the breaks for myself is, taking those breaks more often to just like take a breath. And usually I'll walk away, especially if it's a con. I will have something in my mind of like, I know where like a vending machine is. I'll just go get something from that and then come back, and just take that moment to myself, and then come back to the table. And I usually kind of like really push the idea of like, no, you stand up and you walk away from here and then you come back in 5 minutes. So yeah, there's so many things going on when you're rolling those math rocks.
Whew. Makes me tired just thinking about it.
It's okay. I taught you that breakfast isn't that important. You're good.
I guess you too, Sammy, like any big points that you feel like we should cover as far as like having fun, facilitating fun, fixing fun?
I think we've talked a lot about like what to do when it's not fun and how to fix that. But some things I like to like make sure it's fun for me in my prep, or like hide things in my games, or like plant things that I know will be fun. Like it's not always subverting fun, or not subverting, but it's not always making sure people aren't not having fun. If I got my negatives right, it's like prepping to make sure they do have fun.
Yeah.
Knowing what will make your players get engaged and get really excited about the session. And for me, something that I like to do to just like sprinkle in every now and then is the physical aspect to the game. Whether it's I don't know if you guys have those pens that like they conceal or reveal the ink, whether they're heated or chilled.
Mhm.
And so, I pass out my maps and give them some kind of clue that it was made in the mines where it's so hot and that's where you can whatever. And so they're like, okay, I put my torch to the map and I was like, okay, do it. They say, okay, I do. And I say, no, do it. And they're like, wait a minute. Because they are holding physical paper. I'm like, do it. Go find a lighter. And then like the game changes from there and they're like, what do you mean? And they're like running to a stovetop or something. Like any physical, the work game is a heist game. So I'll have my husband who's an actor record like a Bosley style recording. And so when they get their mission, I play the recording and they're like, it's just this other element. It's not my voice. It's something else. There's some outside agent who's asking for this mission. And like, I know it's going to hit because I know my players and it just like injects this excitement into them. And it's fun for me. That's fun for me is when they're having fun.
Yeah.
So like planning the like extra little, cherries on top.
Having had to fly back, I mean, it makes me think of the analogy of putting your own mask on before trying to help anyone else put theirs. Like I'm surprised it took us this long. If you're not having fun running the game, they're not going to have fun being in it. Like that's kind of what it's going to boil down to more often than not. And everything that we've said thus far also immediately applies to you as the DM. Am I bringing in something else because something's happened in my life that I either can or can't put aside for the session? Am I picking monsters that I enjoy? Am I picking mechanics that I like? Am I going to places in the world that I've created that I'm interested in telling stories in? Am I doing the things that, again, am I putting my own, it sounds weird to call it a fun mask and I don't want to, but like, am I putting my own mask on before I'm trying to help anyone else put theirs on?
That's so true because your energy is going to bleed. Like they're going to feel it. Like if you come to the session, you're like, okay, so today we're going to do like, no one's going to want to do that. Like it's infectious for better or worse, your energy.
Totally. I like your example of physical stuff, Sammy. That's really fun. I haven't done a lot of that, so that's something I need to try more of. Something that my players really like is like every new town they visit, they go directly to the tavern, and I always try to think up some new weird little like tavern game that is in this tavern specifically that they can try to do. Like in one of them, I had basically like a mechanical bowl kind of thing, and like it was like see how many rolls you can get above a certain DC, and that's how long you stay on. And there's some dude's name scrawled on the wall with his dagger who's got the record, and can you beat it, and stuff like that, and little stuff like that they just love to engage with, like finding out, oh, they like this, I'm going to give them more. That's always a great way to do it too.
A good callback.
And then what we do is we put them both together and we run that session at a Western themed bar with a bowl.
Yes.
Figured it out.
I like the treasure map is sweet too, though. I'm going to have to get myself some invisible inks.
It's fantastic.
Now I'm trying to think of like all the like physical elements that you could easily add. And it only needs to be a small thing. Like, and it doesn't need to, it could be one small thing each session, or, cause I think of like, I have one of the death saves die that's its only purpose is one of the giant metal ones. It changes everything about a death save. Not to be used on glass coffee tables, everybody. But like or the idea of bringing that out, because I'll bring it out at a con and be like, well, I hope we don't need this, and then have everyone pass it around. And like, it totally changes how people feel about the whole game of like, wow, this is wild. I had a physical object in my hand that I had not experienced prior to this very moment. And then we start playing.
I mean, even if you take a map, like I sometimes hand out just individual maps so that it's just easier to see in person, rip it in half and give one half to this side of the table and one half to this side. And now they're literally and physically leaning in, like working together to piece it together and figure out where they need to go. Like it can be a small thing, but it changes the everyday part of it. It makes it new.
I like that. I've also found that my players like particular tropes and stuff. I try to throw that kind of stuff in there too. Like I've got one player who's kind of like a power gamer, kind of a min-maxer. So I will every once in a while build some crazy build that kind of counters what he can do and throw it at him to challenge him. And then I've got other players who just like chaos. And so my little brother was kind of one of those, like, whatever the big red button is, I'll press it. So I gave him a bag of 100 random potions from a wizard school. So like it was student potions. So they're not going to do what you want them to. And he would just like drink one a day and see what it did, and it's just that stuff like that is like what your players talk about for years later. Like, oh, remember that one time you turned into a cabbage for 8 hours? It just like, that's the fun that you can't replicate any other way. Tabletops, are kind of like the magic that would create something like that, that we can't experience otherwise. But that's like also what the fun is about for me too.
The bad magic items, potion of invisibility, but it gives you advantage on intimidation checks because it's only your skin that's invisible.
Oh, jeez.
A ring of I could eat, where like you'll never die of hunger, but you're always hungry. So yeah.
Wand of fireballs, and the cast range is stealth. So just blows up on you. Oh man, there's so many joke items out there. There's like the ring of spell slot attunement, and it takes a spell slot, or it takes an attunement slot, but it adds an attunement slot, so it's like essentially worthless.
Oh,
there's so many out there.
So one of the other things we like to do is, and I don't know what we will all come up with for this, but the idea of homework, like, are there specific like media properties that we would want to point our listeners to? And I think it's always like, it's literally anything. Is it a book? Is it a show? Is it a movie? Is it a web comic? Is it literally anything under the sun that like is a good example? And I will start with anything that is in the Gamers series, because it is it's a lower budget series of films. And like, I remember watching Gamers Darkness Rising, and they have a good session, and they all get in a vehicle, and they're like, 2 waffles. And the other person who's new to the table is like, waffles. And the DM is like, yeah, if they do a good job, they get waffles. And then they're all, waffles, ho! And then they just drive off to go get waffles. And I think of all those like late night sessions of, is it Taco Bell? Is it Denny's? Is it, those spaces and places that are wildly unhealthy, but also open. So they meet the criteria. They're open. So yeah, anything from the Gamers.
Okay. My like comfort podcast, my regular go-to is the Adventure Zone Balance. I know we've all heard of it because it should be in the Smithsonian. It is one of the greatest pieces of media that's ever been created. But what it is 4 guys learning how to play D&D. It's like the least intimidating D&D podcast. They're learning how to play together. I think a couple of them knew how to play. I'm not sure. And as they go on, they learn the game and they tell one of the most magical stories I've ever heard. If you finished through episode 69, it's a complete masterpiece. And it was just people who sat around their table and did this with kind of no experience. No, I mean, they're comedians, but like, everybody is funny. Everybody has inside jokes with their friends. And I think it just makes it so approachable. And yeah, it's such a fun story. And it just reminds me, like, you can do that. You can have just as much fun as they are.
Maybe I have. It is like the perfect version of watching people experience D&D for like kind of the first time, where you realize like you hold on to things loosely. Like, another idea of how to have fun is hold on loosely. Be like, that character's name is certainly not Barry Blue Jeans. There's no way. But also starting in the Lost Mines of Phandelver and realizing that like, this is no longer the story. This helped me get to the story I do want to tell. And then develop from there. And I think it's also one of the like reasons like they were doomed never to be able to repeat such magic. Like that nothing will live up to that because it was, it's lightning in a bottle at that point. That kind of thing. Oh, that's a good one. I haven't listened to that again. Well, listeners, I got something to do.
You're starting it over right now.
Yep.
You got a lot of time to listen nowadays, Neal. Okay. I have thought of one that is not tabletop related, but is enough related that I think it works. So we recently had Shelley Mazzanoble on, who talked about her book, Comparing Parenting to Dungeon Mastering. And let me tell you, as a newish parent, truer words have never been spoken. thus far, according to my experience. So I'm going to say the TV show that's for kids, but also for adults, Bluey. And if you don't have any kids, you should still watch it because it is really good. And also there's some that bring me to tears, heart-wrenching 7 minutes of television. But the parents do an incredible job of facilitating fun for their kids in this show. So much so that I've met people who were like, oh, I hate that show because it makes me look like a bad parent. And it's like, you're not getting the point here. But I think that's a great way to see stories about people who are facilitating fun for other people and the lengths they go to make it happen. And when they mess up or whatever happens, they find ways to fix it and make things right again. And I feel like that is a great analog for what it's like to run games with players. So that's my answer. Go watch some Bluey.
I already do. So I mean, I can do more.
I know.
There's a whole episode of there's a whole podcast called Gotta Be Done with two women who live in Australia. And like they've connected with the showrunners because they live there. So if you really want to go to the next level, even breaking down like the story elements of each episode, which is similar to any other like rewatch podcast or anything like that.
But yeah, there's episodes about like Hero's Journey. There's an episode where they all draw characters around the table and then essentially like make a D&D story where they all go on an adventure together. There's a bunch of good examples of making stuff fun and like how you can do it and how if you screw up, what to do to fix it. So definitely a good place to go.
Yeah.
Whew. Well, with all that out of the way, Sammy, where can people go to find more of your work? More about Dungeons and Cabins, when can we expect the date drop for the next event? Who do you have signed on as your DMs? I mean, what information do you have for us?
Okay, well, you can find me at Dungeons and Cabins on Instagram, as well as at Glickety if you want to follow me personally. Date drop will happen within a couple months. I signed a contract today, so we'll do a little teaser campaign where it's official, it's happening. We'll drop that soon, but look for the fall just for, early listeners. I'm inviting all my DMs back. They're like the bravest people I've ever known. They didn't know where this location was. They did not know what they were getting into. And they all said, yes, and we're going. And so, we had James Hayek, Johnny Stanton, Zach Macias, Liam Weinstock, and Kate Osborne, who signed on 7 days before camp and did not skip a beat. It was unbelievable, but they're all invited back. So we will see who joins us. Maybe we'll have new additional DMs this time.
Ooh.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I do love the idea of like, hey, are you interested in coming into the woods with some strangers? Yeah. I mean, it is kind of the pitch.
Literally. And they're like, where is it? And I was like, the mountains. Where is it? Yes.
We'll have cell phone service? No. But yeah, we'll have links to all of that in the show notes and any way that we can help promote what I believe is a truly amazing event. We will always be there to help do so.
Yeah, Dungeons and Cabins as a name for an event is incredible. I mean, are you in marketing? I feel like yeah. So you know what you're doing, and I can tell the website is really well put together. The name Dungeons and Cabins. I mean, no notes.
Yeah. We had a phenomenal time. Like magical, glowing. It was great.
Perfect. And we will definitely have to have you back on when it's closer or just for any reason at all.
Amazing.
As always, we want to thank Sammy for coming on, spending some time with us, sharing her thoughts and ideas, and of course, helping us to remember that TTRPGs are meant to be fun. If you have ways that you've been making your TTRPGs fun, you can always email us at dungeonmastersblock@gmail.com. And of course, if you thought this episode was fun, you could always go to your podcatcher of choice, leave us a rating and review, because how much fun would that be? And of course, the Dungeon Masters Block is a proud member of the Block Party Podcast Network, where you can check out other shows like Bad Venture Club, Dungeons and Dragons and Daughters, Knocked Prone, and more. But as always, we want to thank you for listening to the Dungeon Masters Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game, the only person capable of playing gods, killing characters, and lowering egos all around the table. I'm DM Neal. Good night, good luck, and keep on dungeon mastering.
It's not inspiration, it's not wisdom, and it's bad advice.
Remember, if your players say they weren't having fun, make sure they know it was their fault, not yours.
Goodbye.